Well, greetings, everybody. I'm Robert Locke with TrainingPropertyManagers.com, and we're here today to examine some of the challenges that have been brought about by the COVID-19 crisis. And today we're going to talk about a rent modification agreement and procedure. Our guest in this conversation is attorney Monica Gilroy. I've partnered with Monica for over 20 years, and we've been training in the property management industry together for at least 15. And so welcome to the conversation, Monica.
Thanks as always, Robert. Thanks to our friends in the property management world. And thanks also, Robert, for driving this topic. This is a good one. Again, a lot of chatter about this on listservs, Facebook groups. And, it's good that we can have some specific words and conversations about this topic of rent modification.
Well, good. I've been reading some of those pages too, and it kind of surprises me at how many advisors in the industry are totally against modifying the rent during this epidemic, and I'm kind of wondering why that is. So let's start out with kind of a simple question, kind of as you see it. What is the premise of the issue? What are you seeing as the primary issue that we need to kind of navigate through?
Great question. Yeah, I think the primary issue is that we have to, again, go to this mindset that the property manager's job primarily is going to be enforcing the terms of the lease, right? That's obviously the expectation of the owner. Obviously, rent collection is going to be at the very top of that list. So many managers, if not most, would have policies traditionally of not ever taking any sort of partial pay. That's just not considered a best practice in the industry. And we know that it can create all sorts of challenges for managers and owners in a court setting and otherwise. So, it's really at the bottom line, no matter what the circumstances are, right? Worldwide epidemic, government mandates, closures, managers' duty is still to make absolutely sure that they're collecting the rent, making arrangements to do so, and then documenting and managing that process. So if we're going to execute a modification of what is absolutely, Robert, a policy, right? That can't be done willy-nilly. It can't be done through just a quick email or a spit in a handshake. That isn't what the owner is looking for, right? That's not what they expect. The property manager will look unprepared, unprofessional, and honestly, it won't stand up, right? Most likely if it's challenged by a judge or another professional. And that's going to create liability, which you and I have talked about for years. We don't like to ever see our friends have liability. We don't want them, putting themselves in situations that do that. We want them always thinking about how best to cover themselves through their practices, as well as helping their owners. And something like that type of thinking should really be the priority if we're talking about rent modification and agreement. We've talked for years that at the end of the day, at least it's a contract, right? It's just a contract and it's being able to be altered. But obviously the managers are being paid to manage that lease as a contract, being sure that its terms are enforced and treated with the same type of legal standards that they were when it was created. So we've got to always be sure if we're going to modify the rent, we're doing it in a way just as if we were creating a new contract or a new document from that perspective.
Monica, I've seen the same thing. I've seen a number of our clients kind of do this by email, make modifications for the rent payments, not quite on a yellow scratch pad, but even some have been over the phone. Okay, we'll take half the rent May 15th and half the rent May 30th, some of that kind of thing. And that's very dangerous because you're a licensed professional, you're being paid for your expertise, and the owner expects to be able to hold us accountable for that. Now, you've suggested in previous conversations on this topic that you think it's a two-step process. Explain to our viewers what you mean by that.
Absolutely, sure. I do think it's potentially a two-step process. If you think about it, before we put someone in these properties as the managers, we're doing just some basic due diligence, right? We're finding out about their ability to pay rent and to fulfill the terms of the lease. And I think it would be pretty dangerous, almost reckless, to assume that we're going to be modifying the lease, right, to a major term, the rental parts, without really asking if they really require it and if they really need it. Not that we're suggesting a tenant necessarily would do something deceptive, but it could be possible, and we have seen it in certain areas, but it's really bigger than that. It's just some basic due diligence to ask some questions, maybe a short little application, right? Maybe a rerun of a credit report, or at least asking some obvious questions about their employment. Are they still employed? Just anything we can find out to get a better sense of what are the grounds and the basis for this lease modification. Now, obviously, in an epidemic like this, a tenant is absolutely going to leverage that to their advantage, and we can't really hold that against them. But I do think a short application of some kind is absolutely appropriate, because if you're making a modification to a lease and an owner discovers that you've done this without any process or due diligence, I don't think you're going to look good as the manager. They're going to be questioning that. Eventually, I certainly would if I was an owner. So we've had some opportunities, Robert, based on that, to actually draft some documents for our clients who are asking about how to offer rent payment modifications. And we'll talk about in a minute, ways potentially to get those to our audience. Now, if we're using this first step, which is doing some due diligence through some sort of application, the second step, of course, is going to be approving the tenant and then actually modifying the rent with some sort of rent modification agreement. This could be considered an addendum to the contract, as it should be, but it needs to be, again, written in a more formal fashion. It could potentially need to be drafted by an attorney, depending on your state. Sometimes managers just aren't generally trained, Robert, or even permitted under the laws of their state to do so. So obviously it's very important to have an attorney's hand in this. This addendum should lay out the rules for the modification, any sort of carve-outs or caveats that might be important, the time frames, when things are going to be paid, and then some rules of the roads for the tenants to expect what's going to happen. Obviously, this is not rent deferral. This isn't that they're not paying rent. This is that they're going to have to pay it. So what are the rules for how it's to be paid back, when it's to be paid back, and what happens if it does not?
Okay, now give me your thoughts, Monica, as to whether or not or how involved you think the owner should be in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back, Robert, to what you and I have talked about for years. It really depends on your management model. Obviously, the management model you had at Crown so successfully for all those decades was what you and I lovingly refer to as the big A model. It's that idea that the managers really already have permission in their documents and in their management agreements to modify, terminate, reinstate a lease, really do whatever they need to, including if we need to change a security deposit to a rent payment and other weighty decisions. That's that big A agency model where you as the property manager are standing in the shoes of the owner, right? So, if you are the other model, which we call the small A model, the small A agent, then obviously you are consulting with your owner to make that ultimate decision, set the terms, potentially even show them that application. I would, though, hope, and I would certainly advocate that regardless of what model of agency you have, whether you're a big A who can make that decision unilaterally or a small A agent who absolutely needs to have the owner's final decision, be sure that you are consulting with your owner on this. This is not a time to just, regardless of your model, to be making a decision like that on your own. And you want to be sure that, you're always following your model. So if your owner does need to execute this document, Robert, you need to be sure that they do. And if they don't have to, just obviously be sure you as the property manager have dotted all your I's and crossed your T's.
Monica, as we've kicked this around in the last month or so, I've seen some folks in the Northern listservs and some advisors in the industry not just denounce this strategy, but kind of go ballistic and go on for long discussions about why modifying rent is a bad idea. In other words, the tenant agreed to pay $1,200 a month. The fact that he's out of work shouldn't matter. We've had this policy. So there are many people that have kind of already decided we're not going to do a rent modification agreement. Why do you think that there are some people that are kind of against this? Give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, I think sometimes people are assuming that this is going to be something that's going to affect every single one of their tenants, and it's not. We've heard stories even from these first few weeks of the epidemic that some people are seeing normal payment schedules. So you've got to remember that this situation is so severe, but it does have a set duration. That's the good news. Now, you and I, Robert, may not know how long that's going to be, but we know that one, this is not going to be for everybody. It's probably going to be only a percentage of our tenants who are affected and who would need this. But also, we know that this isn't going to be for years and years and years. It's really just a couple of months, right? As the country continues to reopen and people go back to work, then their income will return, and you won't need these circumstances. So to me, it's easy for a manager to do this without any worry, because again, I doubt that any of our friends listening are being faced with hundreds of applications in any given month. They probably just will have, hopefully one or two, maybe 10, 20, depending on your size. So it's not going to be a nightmare to track it. It's not going to be like you're having to worry about this in terms of how to manage it effectively on a manual level. It's going to be for just a couple months.
Kind of way, one of the rules that kind of I've had in my brain for a number of years along this line is total consistency among all your tenants, the same lease, the same procedures, the same rent collection date, the same rules apply to everybody. And that's been kind of the rule of, if you're going to scale, you have to have total consistency with your management agreements, your rental agreements, the same. In order to manage 200, 500, 1,000 properties, you need complete consistency, right? No exception. This really does feel like an exception. So how does that fit into this model that everything needs to be the same?
Well, again, like we said, I think pretty consistently, this is something that isn't going to be affecting every single tenant. It's not going to be affecting your ability to manage effectively. It does have a duration, and so I think that it's okay to have that exception, right? In the context of it's not a permanent exception, right? It's not a new rule. It's just truly something that's here temporarily, that is not again going to affect every single one of your tenants.
Great. Now, where can our viewers find some of these documents? I take it as you have kind of prepared some of your clients for this and written documents for them, that there is a place that they can find that on your website. Yes?
There sure is. Yeah, we've had so many requests for this type of documentation across the country with our clients. So obviously we love to hear from everyone, but want to be sure that everyone's getting some personal touches. So you can find all of this information at our new website, which is gilroyfirm.com/COVID-19, gilroyfirm.com/COVID-19. It's all there.
Yes, and I've gone to that page, Monica, and one of the things I've noticed is that you've set up a YouTube channel and people can subscribe to it, and I take it you're shooting weekly, or you're taking video that you've shot with NARPA National and posting them out there. We can put this one up there, but I get a sense that this is something that you're going to do on a very consistent basis and get it out on the YouTube channel, yes?
Absolutely. We also have a group that we've got going so that we can see the trends, answer the questions. So if you're on Facebook, look for the Gilroy Firm. Again, we know we're all in this together, and we're going to all need some extraordinary help. So being able to help in this fashion, all my friends across the country, is wonderful, and we're definitely here for you.
Okay, so you started a discussion on Facebook, so they can go into Facebook, the Gilroy Firm, do a search and join that discussion.
They sure can.
That's where you get some of the questions that you answer by videos over on your YouTube channel. Is that right?
That's exactly right. We're trying to address the needs of our friends and clients and others in the industry by seeing what's worrying people, what the questions are, taking them, and then addressing them in specific videos over on YouTube.
Monica, being a lawyer and taking time to do this for kind of a nickel-dime industry of property management is to really be admired. Thank you for the contribution that you're making to this industry. And it's a small industry, and it's a penny ante business, and yet you kind of step up constantly and are trying to help the whole property management audience in some of these legal issues. And I want you to know, I appreciate it. I know a lot of people in the property management world do it as well. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that compliment, but Robert, truly, this is very near and dear to my heart. 20 plus years with you. This is a great industry. And again, in this certain situation, we are definitely all in it together. So it's always my pleasure to help, even if we're not in a pandemic. It's always my pleasure to help my friends across the country.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And visitors, thank you so much for watching this video today. Go to Monica's site, gilroyfirm.com/COVID-19, and stay tuned. We'll try to bring you more relevant, time-sensitive, informative issues and get Monica's legal side of it to help you out in the business. Thank you so much for listening today.